Hey there, Pack! Welcome back to Sarah's Werewolf Romance Collection, the only place on YouTube where the growls are loud, the romance is spicy, and the alphas are absolutely obsessed. If you're a returning listener, welcome home. And if you're new here, get comfortable, grab a blanket, and prepare your heart, because you have just found your new addiction. Now, listen to this. Imagine having the worst day of your life. It's pouring rain, your van just died, and you're desperate. You see a sleek black SUV pull up, and you think, thank God my ride is here. You jump in, soaking wet, and start bossing the driver around. But then, click! The doors lock. The windows go dark. And the man in the driver's seat? He isn't an Uber driver. He is the most dangerous, possessive Lycan king in the city, and when you scream at him to unlock the door, he just turns around, eyes glowing gold, and smirks. New destination, my bed. Oh, poor Roxy has no idea what she just walked into. But you're about to find out. But before we let the alpha take the wheel, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button until it turns blue, subscribe to join our growing pack, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a wild twist or a spicy confession. And I love meeting you guys, so let's do a roll call. Drop a comment down below and tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? Are you in the US? India? The UK? The Philippines? Let me know in the comments. All right, take a deep breath, because the doors are locked and the engine is purring. Let's dive into I Mistook the Lycan King for my Uber driver. Chapter 1. The Orange and the Deluge. If there was a patron saint of mechanical failures, Roxy Miller was pretty sure she had personally offended him in a past life. Rain didn't just fall in Seattle, it conspired. Today, it was slashing sideways, a relentless gray sheet of water that turned the asphalt into a slick mirror reflecting the city's miserable traffic. Roxy sat behind the wheel of the Orange, her affectionately hated 1998 cargo van, and listened to the sound of her livelihood dying. It started with a wheeze, escalated to a violent shudder that rattled her teeth, and ended with a mournful clunk that sounded suspiciously like a transmission giving up the ghost. "No," Roxy commanded, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled desperation. "Do not do this to me. Not today. We have a schedule, Orange. We have an agreement." The Orange did not care about agreements. The engine sputtered one last defeated cough and died, right in the breakdown lane of I-5, 3 miles from the drop-off point. Roxy slammed her forehead against the steering wheel. Unbelievable! She checked her watch. 2:15 p.m. She had exactly 45 minutes to deliver the beautifully restored mahogany antique mantel clock, currently swaddled in moving blankets in the back. The client, Mrs. Vanderhoven, was a woman who regarded tardiness as a moral failing on par with arson. If Roxy didn't get this clock to her penthouse by 3 p.m., she could kiss the referral bonus goodbye. And Roxy needed that bonus. The rent on her workshop, Miller's Mending, had just gone up, and her cat, Sally, had developed a taste for premium, organic salmon pâté that cost more than Roxy's own groceries. She grabbed her phone, her thumb hovering over her towing app, but hesitated. A tow truck would take an hour. She looked back at the clock. It wasn't huge, a tabletop vintage piece, heavy but manageable if she hauled it. "Okay," she muttered, wiping steam off the windshield. "Plan B." She opened the rideshare app. Bolt? Uber? Lyft? She didn't care. She just needed a vehicle large enough to hold a wet woman and an antique clock. Her fingers flew across the cracked screen, tapping Premium SUV because she wasn't risking the clock in a Honda Civic. Searching for drivers nearby. The rain hammered the roof of the van like a drum solo. Roxy grabbed her oversized flannel shirt, buttoning it to her chin, and pulled on her beanie. She looked like a lumberjack who had lost a fight with a puddle, but she didn't care. Driver found, 1 minute away. Black SUV. License plate, KNG-001. 1 minute, thank God. Roxy scrambled into the back of the van, grunting as she hoisted the clock into her arms. It weighed about 40 pounds, wrapped securely in waterproof tarp. She kicked the back doors open and jumped out into the deluge. Immediate regret. The cold water soaked through her jeans in seconds. She stood on the curb, shielding the clock with her body, squinting through the downpour. Headlights cut through the gloom. A massive, sleek black SUV, some kind of military-grade luxury tank that cost more than her entire education, rolled slowly to a stop right in front of her. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like ink. "Fancy," Roxy muttered, shivering. She didn't wait for the driver to get out. That was the thing with these premium rides. They took too long trying to be polite. She yanked the back door open. It was unlocked. "Sorry for the wet dog smell I'm about to bring into your life," she announced to the interior, shoving the clock onto the pristine leather seat before diving in herself. She slammed the door shut, sealing out the noise of the storm, and exhaled a cloud of condensation. "Okay, buddy," she said, wiping rain from her eyes and buckling her seatbelt. "I'm running late, I'm freezing, and I have a very judgmental old lady waiting for this clock. Step on it." The driver didn't move. Chapter 2. The Lock-In. The silence inside the SUV was heavy. It wasn't just quiet, it was a pressurized stillness, like the air inside a vault before the timer hits 0. The interior smelled expensive, not like the nauseating pine air fresheners most drivers used, but like aged sandalwood, leather, and something earthy, like a forest after a storm. Roxy blinked, water dripping from her nose onto the immaculate floor mats. She looked up at the rearview mirror. The eyes staring back at her were not checking a GPS. They were dark, arresting, and currently wide with a mixture of shock and something far more dangerous. The man in the driver's seat was broad, impossibly broad. His shoulders filled out the tailored suit jacket in a way that suggested the fabric was fighting a losing battle against the muscle beneath. "Did you hear me?" Roxy asked, her patience fraying. She tapped the back of his seat. "The app said drop off at 4th and Pike. Let's go. I'm not paying for idle time." The man turned in his seat. He didn't just turn. He rotated with a predatory grace that made the hair on Roxy's arms stand up. His face was a landscape of sharp angles and rough stubble, handsome in a way that usually came with a warning label. He looked less like a gig economy worker and more like the guy who owned the gig economy. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring slightly. His gaze dropped to her wet flannel, then to the clock, then locked onto her eyes. "Who are you?" His voice was a low rumble, a baritone so deep she felt it vibrate through the leather seat and settle in her chest. Roxy frowned. "I'm the woman paying you to drive. Look, I know I look like a drowned rat, but my rating is 4.8, okay? I don't slam doors. Usually." The man's eyes narrowed. He looked out the window, scanning the perimeter of the street. Roxy followed his gaze, but saw nothing through the rain except blurred shapes. "You need to get out," he said, his tone flat. "Excuse me?" Roxy bristled. "I just waited in a monsoon for you. I am not getting out. I have a schedule." Suddenly, the man's posture stiffened. He looked at the side mirror. Roxy saw a shadow move near the broken-down orange. 2 men in gray hoodies, moving with unnatural speed toward the SUV. The driver didn't explain. He didn't ask. He moved his hand to the console and hit a button. Thunk! The sound of the central locks engaging was heavy, mechanical, and final. It echoed in the small space. Roxy's heart gave a single, hard thump against her ribs. She grabbed the door handle and yanked. Locked. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her gut. She dropped the witty banter instantly. She wasn't a fool. She was a woman alone in a car with a stranger who had just trapped her. "Unlock the door," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the sarcasm. She reached into her pocket, gripping her keys like a weapon. "Unlock this door right now, or I swear to God I will destroy this leather interior." The man turned back to the front, putting the car into drive. The engine purred, a V8 monster waking up. "Sit back," he ordered. It wasn't a request. It was a command, layered with an authority that made her instincts scream, "Obey," which only made her angrier. "I am not sitting back. I am calling the police! Roxy fumbled for her phone with wet fingers. You entered my vehicle, he said calmly, accelerating away from the curb just as the two hooded figures lunged for the door handle she had just tried to open. Roxy missed it, too focused on the driver. And now, because you have no survival instincts, you are coming with me. Coming with you? Roxy shouted, fear turning into adrenaline-fueled rage. This is kidnapping. I ordered a ride to a penthouse, not an abduction. Where the hell are you taking me? The driver glanced at her in the mirror again. A small, dark smirk touched the corner of his mouth, transforming his face from terrifying to devastating. New destination, he drawled. Chapter 3. 0 Stars. The SUV tore through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle with a smoothness that defied physics. The driver navigated traffic like he possessed a sixth sense, weaving through gaps that didn't exist until he occupied them. Roxy sat rigid in the back seat, her phone clutched in her hand like a grenade. She hadn't dialed 911 yet, mostly because he was actually driving toward downtown, exactly where she needed to go. If he was kidnapping her, he was taking a very efficient route to her client's house. You're going the right way, she accused, eyeing him suspiciously. I know, he replied. His voice was calm, infuriatingly unbothered by her panic. So, let me get this straight, Roxy snapped, finding her courage again as the city skyline came into view. You lock the doors, threaten me, and then just complete the trip. Is this some kind of new extreme service tier? Terror and transport? The man's eyes flickered to the mirror. You seemed eager to leave that curb. Yeah, because of the rain, not because I wanted to be held hostage by a guy in a $3,000 suit. 5,000, he corrected absently. Roxy gaped at him. You are unbelievable. Who even are you? You don't look like an Uber driver. Where is your phone mount? Where are the complimentary mints? He ignored the question about the mints. You can call me Roman. Okay, Roman. She spat the name like a curse word. Well, Roman, you are getting 0 stars. Actually, I'm reporting you. I'm writing a review that will scorch the earth. Driver was punctual, but possessed a god complex and questionable understanding of consent regarding door locks. Roman actually chuckled. It was a low, rusty sound, like he hadn't used that particular muscle in a long time. I look forward to reading it. He pulled up to the curb of the address she had mentally projected, the Vanderhoven residence. He put the car in park, and the locks clicked open instantly. Roxy blinked, thrown off balance. He was letting her go, just like that? Get out, he said, but his tone lacked the harshness from before. It sounded almost reluctant. Roxy didn't wait to be told twice. She grabbed her clock, hugging it to her chest. She shoved the door open, the familiar wet chill of Seattle greeting her. She stepped out, then paused, leaning back in. You're a maniac, she told him, water dripping from her beanie onto her nose. And you drive like a getaway pilot. Roman turned in his seat to face her fully. For the first time, she saw the color of his eyes clearly. They were amber, gold and fierce, glowing slightly in the gloom of the storm. They swept over her face, lingering on her mouth, then her eyes. Drive safe, little thief, he said softly. Thief? Roxy sputtered. I paid for this ride. Wait! She realized the app hadn't even registered the pickup. I didn't pay. How much do I owe you? It's on the house, Roman murmured. Consider it an investment. An investment in what? My entertainment. Before she could throw a retort back at him, or the wet receipts from her pocket, the dark window slid up, sealing him away. The massive black SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic and disappearing into the gray afternoon, leaving Roxy standing on the sidewalk, clutching a grandfather clock and feeling completely, utterly bewildered. 2 stars, she whispered to the empty street. Definitely 2 stars. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. The office of Castellan Heritage Architecture occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest glass needle in Seattle. It was a space of minimalist intimidation, Steel, glass, and polished concrete. It was designed to make visitors feel small. Roman Castellan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the rain wash the city clean. He shouldn't be here. He should be in the boardroom, tearing apart the proposals from the European PAC representatives. But all he could smell was her. It clung to the leather of his back seat. Rainwater, sawdust, orange polish, and beneath it all, the sweet, electric scent of a mate. He clenched his hands into fists, the knuckles straining. He had waited 300 years, 3 centuries of building an empire, of leading the North American Lycans, of keeping the peace between the warring factions. He had resigned himself to being the king who ruled alone. And then she had jumped into his car. She was chaotic. She was rude. She had insulted his suit and threatened to destroy his upholstery. She was perfect. "You're brooding," a voice said from the doorway. Roman didn't turn. "I am thinking." Jax, his beta and head of security, walked in. Jax was 6'5", built like a vending machine, and was currently holding a half-finished knitting project, a scarf in neon pink. It was his therapy for dealing with Roman's temper. "The rogues at the pickup point have been handled," Jax said, sitting on the edge of Roman's mahogany desk. "They were tracking the scent of that antique she was carrying. Old magic. Nasty stuff. She didn't have a clue, did she?" "No," Roman said. "She thought she was late for a delivery. Have a team retrieve that clock from the client tonight. Tell her it was recalled for a customs violation and pay her triple its value. I don't want innocent blood on my ledger." Jax nodded, making a note on his phone. "So," Jax poked a needle through the wool. "We found her. It wasn't hard. She shouted her business name at her phone while she was in the car. Miller's Mending. Name is Roxanne Miller. Goes by Roxy." Roman turned slowly. "Tell me." 26 years old, restoration expert, lives above her workshop in Fremont. Single, no PAC affiliation, completely human. Financials are tight. She drives a van that should be legally condemned. "She called it the Orange," Roman murmured, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "She has a roommate," Jax added, watching Roman closely. Roman's head snapped up, a low growl vibrating in his chest. "A male?" Jax smirked. "A cat. Named Sally. Apparently the neighbors complain about the cat more than they complain about the noise from her power saws." Roman exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. A human. A struggling, feisty, oblivious human who had absolutely no idea she had just walked into the crosshairs of the most powerful predator on the continent. "What's the plan, boss?" Jax asked. "Do we abduct her? Explain the mating bond? Buy her a new van?" "No," Roman said, buttoning his jacket. "If I tell her what I am, she'll run. She called me a maniac today. Trust must be built." He walked over to his desk and picked up a file, a legitimate architectural survey of the Castellan estate. The woodwork in the West Wing had been needing attention for decades. He had ignored it until now. "I need a restoration expert," Roman said smoothly. "For the West Wing. It requires a delicate touch. Someone passionate." Jax rolled his eyes. "You're going to hire her? That's your move? The boss/employee trope?" "I am going to offer her a job she can't refuse," Roman corrected. "And then I am going to figure out how to keep her." "She's going to eat you alive," Jax muttered, going back to his knitting. "I certainly hope so," Roman replied, and walked out the door. Chapter 5. The Commission. Miller's Mending smelled like safety. It was a cocktail of varnish, old wood, coffee, and the lavender candles Roxy burned to cover up the smell of the varnish. Roxy was on her knees, sanding the leg of a Victorian chair, aggressively taking her frustration out on the wood grain. It had been 24 hours since the incident with the Uber driver, and she still couldn't shake the feeling of those amber eyes watching her. "He was just a weird rich guy, Sally," she told the ginger tabby cat sprawled across her workbench. Sally, who resembled a furry beach ball, blinked slowly and swatted her tail unimpressed. "Don't look at me like that. I saved $300 on that ride. Technically, I'm a financial genius." The bell above the shop door chimed. Roxy wiped her dusty hands on her jeans and stood up, pushing a stray curl out of her face. "Be right there. If you're selling solar panels, I'm armed with a sander." She walked from the back room into the main storefront, which was cluttered with half-finished projects, lamps without shades, tables without legs, and mirrors that needed resilvering. "I am not selling solar panels." The voice stopped her dead in her tracks. It was that voice, the baritone that vibrated the floorboards. Roxy looked up. Standing in the center of her dusty, chaotic shop was Roman. He looked absurdly out of place. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her entire inventory. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, currently resting on a floor she hadn't swept in 3 days. He seemed too big for the room, his presence sucking all the oxygen out of the air. Roxy crossed her arms, trying to hide the fact that her heart had just done a traitorous little flip. "You, the maniac." "Roxanne," he nodded politely. "How do you know my name? And how did you find me?" She narrowed her eyes. "Are you stalking me? Because I have a heavy stapler and I know how to use it." Roman smiled, and it was dazzling. It softened the harsh angles of his face. "You left your invoice on the seat of my car. It had your business address." He held up a crumpled piece of paper, the receipt for the clock delivery. Roxy felt her face heat up. "Oh, right. Well, thanks for returning it. You could have mailed it." "I could have," Roman agreed. He took a step closer, running a gloved hand along the edge of a dusty oak table. He touched the wood with a reverence that surprised her. "But I have a business proposition." "I don't need a driver," Roxy said quickly. "My van is resting. It'll be fine." "I need a restorer," Roman said, ignoring her lie about the van. He turned those intense amber eyes on her. "I have a family estate just outside the city. The woodwork is original, 17th century. It has been neglected. I need someone who can bring it back to life without destroying its soul." Roxy hesitated. 17th century? That was the holy grail of restoration. "I'm expensive," she bluffed, trying to scare him off. "And I don't work for people who lock me in cars." "I'll pay double your usual rate," Roman said without blinking. "And I promise to leave the door locks alone." Roxy bit her lip. She looked at the pile of bills on her counter. She looked at Sally, who was currently eating a spider because they were out of the good food. She looked back at Roman, who was watching her with a patience that felt predatory. "Triple," Roxy said. "Triple my rate, and you pay for materials up front." Roman's smile widened, showing a hint of very white, very sharp teeth. Done. Chapter 6. The Traitor. The following afternoon, Roman returned to Miller's mending. He didn't arrive with a fanfare of trumpets, but the atmosphere in the shop shifted the moment he walked through the door. The air suddenly felt heavier, charged with static electricity, as if a storm had decided to move indoors. Roxy was behind the counter, wrestling with a spreadsheet that refused to balance. "You're early," she accused without looking up. "I haven't even drafted the contract clauses about you not murdering me in the woods." "I brought the retainer check," Roman said, placing a sleek black envelope on the scarred countertop. "And a peace offering." He held up a small, vacuum-sealed bag of what looked like very expensive artisanal salmon jerky. Before Roxy could ask who the fish was for, a streak of orange fur launched itself from the top of the bookshelf. Sally, Roxy's 20-pound ginger tabby, a creature known for hissing at priests and biting the mailman, landed on the counter with a heavy thud. Usually, this was the part where Sally swiped at the intruder's hand. Roxy flinched, waiting for the bloodshed. Instead, Sally marched up to Roman, sniffed his knuckles with intense concentration, and then did the unthinkable. She rubbed her cheek against his hand and let out a purr that sounded like a diesel engine idling. Roxy dropped her pen. "You have got to be kidding me." Roman scratched the cat behind the ears, his large hand gentle. Sally closed her eyes in ecstasy, looking like a traitorous loaf of sourdough bread. "She likes me," Roman noted, his voice laced with amusement. "She hates everyone," Roxy sputtered. "She bit my ex-boyfriend so hard he needed a tetanus shot. She growls at the pizza guy. I'm pretty sure she's a demon in a fursuit." "Animals have good instincts," Roman said, feeding the cat a piece of the high-end salmon. Sally practically inhaled it. "They know who to trust." "Or they know who buys the $60-a-pound fish snacks," Roxy countered, crossing her arms. She felt a bizarre pang of jealousy. "You're bribing my staff. That's unethical." Roman looked up from the cat, his amber eyes locking onto hers. The amusement faded into that intense, unwavering focus that made Roxy's breath hitch. "I take care of what's mine, Roxanne. That extends to the people and creatures around them." The weight of his words hung in the air, ambiguous and thrilling. Roxy cleared her throat, grabbing the envelope to distract herself. She opened it and nearly choked. The check was for 5 times her usual retainer. "This is..." She stared at the zeros. "This is too much." "It covers the restoration," Roman said smoothly, leaning against the counter. "And the rush fee. And the I locked you in a car inconvenience fee." "Okay," Roxy said, trying to maintain her professional skepticism despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "But if you think buying my cat's loyalty gets you a discount, you're wrong. Sally is a mercenary. She has no allegiance." "We'll see," Roman murmured. He bent down, whispering something to the cat that Roxy couldn't catch. Sally chirped, a sound she had never made in her life, and flopped over, exposing her fluffy white belly. Roxy stared at the ceiling. "I am being usurped in my own home by a billionaire and a fat cat. This is rock bottom." Chapter 7. The Leak. Seattle, true to form, decided to test the structural integrity of Roxy's life 2 days later. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless gray curtain that turned the streets into rivers. Inside the workshop, the rhythmic plink, plink, plink of water hitting a metal bucket was driving Roxy insane. "Just hold on," she muttered to the bucket, which was strategically placed over a priceless 1920s vanity. "I just need to finish this varnish." The roof had been leaking since November. Her landlord, a man named Mr. Henderson, who possessed the urgency of a sloth, kept promising to send a guy. The guy never came. The front door chimed. Roxy didn't look up from the vanity. "We're closed. Unless you're the roofer, go away." "I am not the roofer," a deep voice rumbled, "but I appear to be just in time." Roxy looked up to see Roman standing in the entryway. He was wet, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, droplets running down the sharp line of his jaw. He wasn't wearing his usual suit jacket, just a crisp white dress shirt that was now translucent enough to reveal the dark ink of a tattoo on his shoulder. "Roman," she sighed, wiping varnish from her hands. "I can't deal with the brooding billionaire act today. My roof is crying, my van is still dead, and I smell like chemicals." Roman ignored her complaint. He looked up at the ceiling, where a dark water stain was spreading aggressively. He didn't ask for permission. He simply walked past her, heading toward the back storage room where she kept the ladder. "Hey!" Roxy scrambled after him. "What are you doing? You can't just walk into the back." Roman emerged with the aluminum ladder effortlessly balanced in one hand. "Do you have a tarp?" "Yes, but wait, you are not going up there." Roxy planted herself in front of him. "You are wearing a shirt that probably costs more than my rent. Put the ladder down." Roman looked down at her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes dancing with that maddening humor. "Roxanne, do you have a better plan? The bucket is full." "I'll empty the bucket." "And when the ceiling collapses on that vanity?" Roxy opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right. She hated that he was right. "Fine, but if you fall and break your neck, I am not liable. I have a sign. Somewhere." Roman set the ladder up under the leak. Then, methodically, he began to roll up his sleeves. Roxy watched, her mouth going dry, as he revealed forearms that were thick with muscle and corded with veins. He didn't look like a CEO who pushed paper. He looked like a man who built things with his bare hands. He climbed the ladder with a predator's grace, silent and sure-footed. He inspected the leak, grabbed the staple gun and tarp she handed him, and patched the internal drip with an efficiency that was honestly insulting. "It's a temporary fix," he said, descending the ladder. He wiped dust from his hands, looking entirely too comfortable. "I'll have my crew come tomorrow to replace the shingles." "I didn't ask for your help," Roxy said, crossing her arms to keep from thanking him. "I don't need rescuing." Roman stepped closer, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. He smelled like rain and power. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Roxy," he said softly, "even the ones who yell the loudest." Chapter 8. The Plague. It started with a sneeze that sounded like a pistol shot. By noon, Roxy's head felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, and her throat felt like she had swallowed a handful of broken glass. "I'm fine," she croaked to the empty shop. "Just a little dust allergy." She stumbled as she tried to lift a dining chair. The world tilted violently to the left. She grabbed the workbench to steady herself, but her knees were made of jelly. The flu had arrived, and it had brought friends. Fever, chills, and a complete loss of motor function. "Okay," she whispered, her vision blurring. "Maybe a short nap." She didn't make it to the stairs. The floor rushed up to meet her. She expected the hard impact of concrete. Instead, she was caught by something solid and warm. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, hauling her up before she could hit the ground. "You are burning up," a voice growled near her ear. It sounded angry. Roxy blinked, trying to focus. Roman was there. Why was he always there? Was he haunting her? "Not burning," she mumbled, her head lolling against his chest. "Just thermal regulation issues." "You're an idiot," Roman said, but his grip was incredibly gentle. He scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing more than the cat. "Put me down," she protested weakly, slapping at his shoulder. "I have work. The vanity." "The vanity can wait. You are going to bed." He carried her up the narrow, creaky stairs to her apartment. Roxy was too delirious to be embarrassed about the mess. The pile of laundry on the chair, the mugs on the coffee table. He kicked the bedroom door open and deposited her onto her duvet. "Stay," he ordered. "I'm not a dog," Roxy muttered, closing her eyes. The mattress felt like heaven. "You can't tell me what to do." "Watch me." She heard him moving around the apartment. She heard the faucet running. She heard the fridge opening. "Sally," she mumbled, "don't let him steal the silver." A few minutes later, a cool cloth was placed on her forehead. Roxy sighed, the heat draining out of her skin. She cracked one eye open. Roman was sitting on the edge of her bed, his tie gone, his top button undone. He looked out of place in her messy, floral-sheeted bedroom, like a wolf trying to fit into a dollhouse. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "I'm sick. I'm gross." "You are," he agreed, dipping the cloth back into a bowl of water. "But unfortunately, I seem to be unable to leave." "Is it the car lock thing again?" "No," Roman said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. He brushed a damp curl off her forehead. "It's something much more complicated." Chapter 9. Domestic Intruders. Roxy woke up to the smell of chicken soup and the sound of hushed arguing. She peeled her eyes open. It was dark outside. Her fever had broken, leaving her feeling weak but no longer like she was hallucinating. She sat up, wrapping the quilt around her shoulders, and crept toward the living room door. Roman was in her kitchenette. He was stirring a pot on her stove, but he wasn't alone. A giant man, easily as big as Roman, was standing by her refrigerator. He was holding a pair of knitting needles and a ball of neon pink yarn. "You cannot stay here all night," the giant whispered aggressively. "The council is meeting at dawn. If you miss it because you're playing nursemaid to a human, they will riot." "Let them riot," Roman replied calmly, tasting the soup. "Does this need more salt?" "It needs more cyanide," the giant grumbled. "Roman, seriously, you are the king. You can't just camp out in a studio apartment in Fremont. It smells like varnish and cat litter in here. Sally, who was perched on the top of the fridge, let out a low, menacing growl at the giant. See? The giant pointed a knitting needle at the cat. The beast hates me. It's an omen. Roxy stepped into the light. Who are you calling a beast? Both men snapped their heads toward her. Roman's face relaxed instantly. The giant looked terrified. She lives, the giant muttered. Roxy. Roman put the spoon down and walked over to her, scanning her face with an intensity that made her knees weak. He placed the back of his hand against her cheek. Fever is gone. Who is the mountain in my kitchen? Roxy asked, pointing at the stranger. I'm Jax, the giant said, holding up his knitting. I'm security, and technically, I'm supposed to be dragging him out of here. Jax is leaving, Roman said, shooting his beta a look that could strip paint. Right, leaving. Jax gathered his yarn. He looked at Roxy, then at Roman, and shook his head. If you need me, I'll be in the car, knitting a shroud for my career. Jax squeezed out the door, leaving the apartment suddenly very quiet. Security? Roxy asked, raising an eyebrow. You have security knitting in your car? He has anxiety, Roman said smoothly. He steered her toward the small two-person table. Sit, eat. He placed a bowl of soup in front of her. It wasn't canned. It was homemade, rich with herbs she didn't even have in her pantry. Did you make this? She asked, taking a sip. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. I can cook, Roman said, sitting opposite her. It's a survival skill. You're a billionaire CEO, Roxy pointed out. Don't you have people for this? I have people for everything, Roman said quietly. He watched her eat, his gaze heavy and possessive. But I didn't want anyone else doing this. The intimacy of the moment hit Roxy like a punch to the gut. He was in her kitchen, feeding her soup, watching her like she was the most interesting thing in the world. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. Chapter 10. The Almost. By the time Roxy finished the soup, the atmosphere in the apartment had shifted from medical emergency to something far more dangerous. She felt better, human enough to realize she was wearing oversized pajamas with cartoon penguins on them in front of the most attractive man she had ever met. You should go, she said softly. She stood up, taking her bowl to the sink. I'm not dying anymore. You don't have to babysit. Roman followed her. He didn't crowd her, but his presence was a warm wall behind her back. I'm not babysitting. Then what are you doing? Roxy turned around. She was trapped between the sink and his chest. He was close. Too close. She could see the flecks of gold in his irises, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. I'm making sure you're okay, he said. Why? Roxy demanded, her voice shaking slightly. We barely know each other, Roman. You hired me 3 days ago. You locked me in a car. Now you're fixing my roof and making me soup? What is this? Is this some kind of game? Roman stepped closer. He placed his hands on the counter on either side of her, boxing her in. He didn't touch her, but the heat radiating from him was intoxicating. It's not a game, he rumbled. His voice dropped to that vibration that she felt in her toes. I am not a man who plays games, Roxanne. When I see something I want, something rare, I don't let it go. Roxy looked up at him, her breath hitched. I'm not an antique chair you can just buy. No. Roman lowered his head until his lips were inches from hers. You are priceless. The air crackled. Roxy's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted to grab the lapels of his shirt and pull him down. She tilted her chin up, her eyelids fluttering shut. Buzz. 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 Roman's phone, vibrating on the table, sounded like a jackhammer in the silence. Roman froze. He closed his eyes, a look of pure, unadulterated frustration crossing his face. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against hers for a fleeting second. Do not answer it, Roxy whispered, surprised by her own boldness. I have to, Roman said, his voice strained. It's the dedicated line. It means something is burning. He stepped back, the loss of his warmth hitting her instantly. He grabbed the phone, looked at the screen, and his face hardened into a mask of cold fury. I have to go, he said. The tenderness was gone, replaced by the terrifying intensity of the king. Lock the door behind me, Roxy. Do not open it for anyone but me. Roman? She asked, stepping forward. Stay inside, he commanded. And then he was gone, leaving Roxy alone in the kitchen with the lingering scent of sandalwood and the overwhelming feeling that she had just stepped off a cliff. Chapter 11. Radio silence. For 3 days, Roxy's phone was quieter than a library after closing time. There were no texts, no calls, no mysterious black SUVs idling on the curb outside Miller's Mending. Roman Castellan had stormed out of her apartment, leaving a lingering scent of sandalwood and unfinished business, and then simply vanished. Roxy told herself she didn't care. She told Sally, who was currently sulking because the premium salmon jerky supply had run dry, that it was for the best. He's a billionaire, Sally, Roxy argued, aggressively stripping paint off a cedar chest. They have short attention spans. He probably got bored. Or maybe he realized that dating a woman who wears penguin pajamas is a PR nightmare. Sally yawned, unimpressed, and licked a paw. Exactly, Roxy muttered. We don't need him. We have the retainer check. We are independent women. But every time the door chimed, Roxy's heart did a traitorous little gymnastic routine that she absolutely hated. She wasn't pining. She was just annoyed. You don't almost kiss someone in their kitchen and then ghost them. It was rude. It was bad manners. It was a 1-star review waiting to happen. On the morning of the 4th day, a vehicle pulled up. It wasn't Roman. It was the Mountain. Jax stepped out of a silver sedan this time, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly straining across his massive shoulders. He walked into the shop, holding a coffee carrier with 4 cups in it. Peace offering, Jax grunted, setting the coffee on the counter. He's alive, just busy. Roxy didn't look up from her ledger. I didn't ask. You were sanding that table so hard I thought you were trying to start a fire, Jax observed. You're mad. I am a professional, Roxy corrected, snapping the ledger shut. I don't get mad at clients. I just charge them extra. She took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. Hazelnut oat milk latte. Exactly how she liked it. She narrowed her eyes. How does he know my coffee order? He knows everything, Jax said ominously, then sighed. Look, the boss, Mr. Castellan, sent me to pick you up. Ideally, without you biting me. The West Wing assessment. You cashed the retainer. Roxy hesitated. She should say no. She should tell them to reschedule. But the check in her bank account had already cleared, and she had already used most of it to pay off her overdue back rent. Fine. Roxy grabbed her tool bag, which weighed about 30 pounds. But if he locks the doors again, I'm using my chisel on the upholstery. Understood, Jax said. He looked terrified. Also, he said to tell you to bring the cat. Roxy froze. Excuse me? He said the cat would get lonely, and he acquired some fresh sashimi-grade tuna. Roxy looked at Sally. The cat was already sitting by the door, waiting. You are a disgrace to your species, Roxy told the cat. Meow, Sally replied, which roughly translated to, Get in the car, loser. Chapter 12. The Wolf's Den. The drive to the Castellan estate took 40 minutes, leading them out of the gray drizzle of the city and into the deep, verdant forests of the Pacific Northwest. The trees here were ancient, towering Douglas firs that blocked out the sky, creating a tunnel of green shadows. Roxy sat in the back, clutching her tool bag. Sally was in a luxury travel carrier that Jax had produced from the trunk, purring loudly. So, Roxy asked, trying to break the silence, is he a vampire? Is that why he lives in the woods? Jax glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes widening slightly. No, not a vampire. Mob boss? Architect, Jax corrected. Right. An architect with bulletproof cars and security guards who knit. Roxy looked at the passenger seat where Jax's neon pink scarf was currently resting. How's the scarf coming along? It's a snood now, Jax said proudly. I panicked during a meeting yesterday and added 6 inches. The car turned off the main road onto a private drive paved with cobblestones. Roxy gasped. The Castellan estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. It was a sprawling structure of dark stone and timber, built into the side of a cliff overlooking a churning river. It looked like something out of a gothic romance novel, brooding and magnificent. It screamed old money, the kind of money that didn't just buy things, but owned history. Subtle, Roxy deadpanned. He likes privacy, Jax said, pulling up to the massive front doors. The moment the car stopped, the front doors opened. Roman stepped out. Roxy's breath hitched. He looked terrible. And by terrible, she meant devastatingly handsome, but exhausted. There were dark circles under his amber eyes, and a bandage was visible peeking out from the collar of his black dress shirt. He moved with a slight stiffness, like his whole body was bruised. He walked down the steps, ignoring Jax, and opened Roxy's door himself. You came, he said, his voice rougher than usual. It sounded like gravel crunching under tires. I have a contract, Roxy said, stepping out. She tried to ignore the way his presence wrapped around her like a heavy wool blanket. And apparently, you have tuna. Roman's lips quirked into a tired smile. Priorities. He reached into the car and picked up Sally's carrier. Hello, traitor, Sally chirped affectionately. What happened to you? Roxy asked, nodding at the bandage on his neck. Cut yourself shaving? With a machete? Roman touched the bandage absently. Workplace accident, dealing with hostile negotiations. You need a union, Roxy said, grabbing her tool bag before he could take it. Okay, Castellan, show me this woodwork you're so worried about. I'm on the clock. She marched past him toward the house, refusing to let him see that her hands were shaking. She smelled danger on him, sharp, metallic, and terrifying. But beneath that, she smelled the sandalwood scent that made her want to lean in. Roman watched her go, his eyes darkening. Jax, he murmured, low enough that only the wolf could hear. Perimeter check. If anything crosses the line today, kill it. Chapter 13. The West Wing. The interior of the estate was just as intimidating as the exterior. High ceilings, stone floors, and fireplaces large enough to roast a whole ox. But it was cold. It felt empty, like a museum that hadn't seen a visitor in decades. Roman led her down a long hallway to the West Wing. Here, the air grew stale. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the heavy velvet drapes. This section has been closed off for 50 years, Roman explained, his voice echoing slightly. My grandfather didn't care for it. I intend to reopen it. He pushed open a set of double doors. Roxy walked in and immediately forgot about the billionaire, the tension, and the bandage. She was looking at a tragedy. The room was a library, lined floor to ceiling with intricate, hand-carved walnut paneling. But it was dying. Water damage had turned the rich wood gray in patches. Mold was creeping along the cornices. A magnificent, rolling ladder lay broken on the floor. Oh no, Roxy whispered, dropping her bag. She walked over to the wall, running her hand along a carved wolf's head that was missing an ear. This is criminal. Who let this happen? Neglect is a slow poison, Roman said, leaning against the doorframe. He watched her work. He watched the way her hands moved over the wood, gentle and reverent. It's salvageable, Roxy muttered, pulling out a moisture meter. But it's going to take months. We need to strip the rot, treat the fungus, reseal. Roman, this is a massive job. I have time, he said softly, and I have the money. Roxy turned to face him. He was watching her with that intensity again, the look that made her feel like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Why didn't you call? She asked. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Roman stiffened. I was occupied. Occupied with hostile negotiations? She gestured to his neck. You disappear, then you show up looking like you went 12 rounds with a bear, and you act like nothing happened? Roman pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. The predator was back in his walk. I didn't call, Roxanne, because if I hear your voice when I am like this, I lose my focus, and right now, I cannot afford to lose focus. Why? Roxy challenged, standing her ground even though every instinct told her to run. What are you afraid of? I am afraid, Roman stopped inches from her, his voice a low growl, that I will drag you into a world you are not built for. I'm built for plenty, Roxy snapped. I fix broken things, Roman. That's what I do. So stop treating me like I'm made of glass. Roman looked at her, his eyes flashing gold. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, trembling slightly. You are not glass, Roxy. You are the fire that melts it. Chapter 14. The Breach. 3 hours later, Roxy was deep in the zone. She had set up a workspace in the center of the library. Roman had left her alone to handle business, which apparently involved him pacing in the hallway like a caged tiger. The sun had set, plunging the forest outside into darkness. The library was lit only by the portable floodlights Roxy had brought. She was scraping layers of black varnish off a windowsill when she smelled it. It wasn't the smell of old wood or chemicals. It was a foul, musky stench, like wet dog and copper. Roxy wrinkled her nose. Did you fart, Sally? Sally, who was sleeping on a priceless velvet armchair, didn't move. Crash! The sound of glass shattering echoed from the hallway. Not the library, somewhere deeper in the house. Roxy froze, her scraper hovering in midair. Roman? Silence. Then, a sound that chilled her blood. A growl. Not a human sound. Not a dog sound. A deep, guttural vibration that felt like tectonic plates grinding together. Roxy dropped her tool. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a solid brass candelabra. Okay, she whispered. Okay, maybe it's a raccoon. A very big, angry raccoon. She crept toward the library doors. Another crash, closer this time, and then the sound of heavy bodies slamming against walls. Roman! She shouted, fear overriding her caution. She threw the doors open. The hallway was chaos. A table had been smashed to splinters. A painting was shredded. And at the end of the corridor, near the main staircase, shadows were moving. Roxy squinted against the gloom. Roman? A figure stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't Roman. It was a man she had never seen before, wiry, with wild eyes and clothes that looked like they had been slept in for weeks. He was holding a jagged piece of wood like a spear. He sniffed the air, his head snapping toward Roxy. A twisted grin spread across his face. Found her, the stranger hissed. His voice sounded wet. The little pet. Roxy raised the candelabra. Take one more step, pal, and I'll redecorate your face. The man laughed, a high, manic sound. Feisty. The king likes them feisty. He lunged. Roxy swung the candelabra with all her might, but he was unnaturally fast. He caught her wrist mid-swing, his grip crushing. Get off me! She screamed, kicking him in the shin with her combat boot. He didn't even flinch. He yanked her closer, baring teeth that were filed to points. Let's see if you taste as sweet as you smell. Then, the world exploded. A black blur launched itself from the balcony above. It hit the intruder with the force of a freight train, tearing him away from Roxy and slamming him into the stone wall. Chapter 15. The Dog. Roxy was thrown backward, sliding across the polished floor. She scrambled up, gasping for breath, grabbing the candelabra again. Roman! She looked at the spot where the intruder had been. The intruder was there, pinned to the wall. But the thing pinning him wasn't a man. It was a wolf. A massive, midnight black wolf, easily the size of a pony. Its fur bristled like wire, and its jaws were clamped around the intruder's shoulder. Blood, dark and viscous, sprayed across the wallpaper. Roxy's brain simply stopped. Bear, she thought. No, too lean. Dog? No, too big. Monster. The wolf shook its head violently, and the intruder went limp, dropping to the floor like a rag doll. The wolf stood over the body, its chest heaving. A low, terrifying growl rumbled from its throat, vibrating the floorboards under Roxy's feet. Slowly, the massive beast turned its head. Amber eyes locked onto hers. Roxy knew those eyes. She backed away, her hand trembling so hard the candelabra rattled against the wall. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no!" The wolf took a step toward her. It didn't look aggressive. It looked pleading? It whined, a high, desperate sound that didn't match its nightmare appearance. It began to change. The sound of bones cracking filled the hallway, a sickening snap-pop-crunch that made Roxy gag. The fur receded, the snout shortened, the massive paws contorted into hands. Roxy watched in horrified fascination as the monster dissolved and a man took its place. Roman. He was naked, his body covered in sweat and blood, not his own. He fell to his knees, breathing hard, looking up at her with a mixture of shame and desperate hope. "Roxy," he rasped, "please, let me explain." Roxy stared at him. She looked at the dead, or unconscious, guy on the floor. She looked at the blood on the wall. She looked at Roman, naked and shivering in the drafty hallway. The shock finally broke, replaced by a wave of hysterical adrenaline. She pointed a shaking finger at him. "You're a dog," she said, her voice flat. Roman flinched. "I am a Lycan." "You barked," she accused, hysteria bubbling up in her throat. "You literally barked." "I roared," Roman corrected, looking offended despite his nudity. "You're a giant dog," Roxy yelled, throwing her hands in the air. "And you're naked, and you just ate a guy in your hallway. Oh my God, I let a dog fix my roof." "Roxy, listen." "No, stay, sit." Roxy pointed the candelabra at him like a lion tamer. "Bad dog, do not come closer." Roman froze, looking utterly bewildered. "Did you just tell the king of werewolves to sit?" "I don't care if you're the king of England." Roxy grabbed her tool bag, backing toward the front door. "I am leaving. I am taking the cat and I am leaving, and I am billing you for the trauma." She turned and ran, grabbing Sally's carrier from the library on her way out, leaving the naked Lycan king kneeling in the wreckage of his hallway, watching his mate run away for the second time. Chapter 16. The Getaway. Running away from a supernatural crisis is significantly harder when you are carrying a 30-pound tool bag and a luxury cat carrier containing a 20-pound feline who is currently critiquing your cardio. Roxy made it exactly 200 yards down the cobblestone driveway before her lungs began to burn. The adrenaline that had propelled her out of the library, past the naked Lycan king and the corpse of the intruder, was rapidly fading, replaced by the grim reality of physics. "This is ridiculous," she wheezed, stopping to adjust the strap digging into her shoulder. The forest around her was pitch black. The air was thick with the scent of pine and looming rain. "Meow," Sally complained from the carrier. It was a judgmental sound. "Shut up, traitor," Roxy hissed. "You saw him. He turned into a dire wolf, and you wanted me to stay? To do what? Play fetch?" Headlights swept across the trees, blinding her. Roxy flinched, gripping her tool bag like a weapon, ready to swing it at whatever monster was coming next. A silver sedan rolled to a stop beside her. The window rolled down. Jax looked out, his face a mask of weary resignation. "Get in the car, Roxy." "I am not getting in the car with you," she shouted, backing away. "You work for him. You're probably a werewolf too. Are you going to eat me? Or just bury my bones in the backyard?" Jax sighed, rubbing his temples. "I am a beta, not a monster. I don't eat people. And if I wanted to bury you, I wouldn't have brought heated seats." He gestured to the back door. It's a 10-mile walk to the main road. The woods are full of things that are much less polite than Roman. Get in! Roxy looked at the dark, menacing forest. She looked at the heated car. She looked at Sally, who was clawing at the carrier mesh. Fine, she snapped. But if you growl at me, I'm stabbing you with a chisel. She threw her gear into the back and climbed in, slamming the door. The car smelled like new car scent and wool. Jax put the vehicle in drive and pulled away from the fortress, driving with a careful, infuriating calmness. For 10 minutes, the silence was absolute. So, Roxy finally said, staring out the window, he's a dog. He's a Lycan, Jax corrected automatically. Does he have fleas? No. Does he chase cars? Only if they're being driven by enemies of the state. Roxy let out a hysterical little laugh. I can't believe this. I fixed his roof. I let him make me soup. I almost kissed a guy who probably marks his territory on fire hydrants. Jax glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His expression softened slightly. He saved your life tonight, Roxy. That rogue, the thing that broke in, would have torn you apart. Roman didn't shift to scare you. He shifted because it was the only way to end the threat instantly. He was naked, Roxy whispered, the image flashing in her mind. In the hallway. Happens, Jax shrugged. Spandex doesn't really work with the physiology. Look, he's not a monster. He's just complicated. And he's been waiting a very long time for you. For me? Roxy scoffed. He doesn't even know me. He picked me up in a rainstorm. That's how it works, Jax said cryptically. He pulled up to the curb of Miller's Mending. The neon sign flickered overhead, looking blessedly normal. Roxy scrambled out before the car had fully stopped. She grabbed her things, feeling safer the moment her boots hit the cracked city sidewalk. Tell him, she said, leaning back into the window, that I am keeping the retainer fee, for pain and suffering, and tell him to never come near me again. Jax didn't argue. He just nodded, looking sad. I'll tell him. Drive safe, Roxy. Chapter 17. The Hangover. The next morning, Roxy woke up expecting the events of the previous night to feel like a nightmare. They didn't. They felt like a bruise. She dragged herself out of bed, ignoring the pile of penguin pajamas on the floor, and trudged down to the shop. Miller's Mending was quiet. The half-sanded chairs and stripped tables looked mundane, boring. Okay, she clapped her hands together, the sound echoing in the empty room. Back to reality. No more billionaires, no more castles, no more wolves. She tried to work. She really did. She spent 3 hours trying to recane a rocking chair, but her hands kept shaking. Every time a shadow moved in the corner of her eye, she jumped. Every time a customer opened the door, her heart hammered against her ribs in a frantic rhythm, hoping and fearing it was him. It never was. Roman listened. He stayed away. By day 3, the silence was deafening. Roxy had cleaned the entire shop twice. She had organized her screws by size, thread count, and emotional resonance. She had even retrieved the Orange, her van, which was suddenly running with a suspicious smoothness, though she refused to question if Jax had secretly tampered with it. He was a liar, Sally, Roxy told the cat, who was draped over the radiator like a despondent fur stole. He lied by omission. That's the worst kind. You can't just build a relationship on a foundation of, oh, by the way, I turn into an apex predator during stressful situations. Sally didn't even look at her. The cat was on a hunger strike, refusing the generic kibble Roxy had bought to replace the premium salmon. Don't look at me like that, Roxy snapped. We have dignity. We don't sell out for fish. Roxy walked over to the window, staring out at the rainy street. A black SUV drove past. Her breath hitched. It was just a suburban mom dropping off kids. The disappointment that crashed over her was heavy and suffocating. I hate him, she whispered to the glass. I hate him for making me feel safe, and then showing me that the world is even scarier than I thought. But beneath the fear, there was something else. A nagging, persistent memory. The way he had looked at her in the hallway, not the wolf, but the man. naked, bloody, and on his knees. He hadn't looked like a monster. He had looked terrified. He had looked like a man who had just revealed his deepest shame and was waiting for the verdict. And she had yelled, "Sit!" Roxy groaned, burying her face in her hands. "I am the worst person in the world. I treated a supernatural king like a golden retriever." She looked at the check on the counter, the retainer fee. It was enough money to pay off her student loans, to finally expand the shop, to buy Sally a lifetime supply of salmon. But the contract wasn't finished. The West Wing was still rotting, and Roxy Miller never left a job unfinished. Chapter 18. The Withdrawal. The gym at the Castellan estate looked like it had been hit by a localized tornado. Heavy bags lay ripped open, their stuffing spilling out like entrails. Weights were scattered across the floor. A steel bench press bar was bent into a U shape. Roman sat on a wooden plyometric box in the center of the destruction, his head in his hands. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. The wolf inside him was pacing, howling, scratching at the back of his mind, demanding its mate. "She rejected us," the wolf snarled. "We frightened her." "I know," Roman muttered to the empty room. "I know." The door creaked open. Jax walked in, holding a neon-pink yarn ball that was now the size of a watermelon. He stepped over a destroyed dumbbell. "The council is asking questions," Jax said softly. "They want to know why the king is hiding in the basement. They want to know about the rogue." "The rogue was sent by the Southern Pack," Roman said, his voice void of emotion. "They knew the perimeter sensors were down for maintenance. It was an inside leak." "We're investigating," Jax promised. He hesitated. "And the girl?" Roman flinched. "She is gone, Jax. I terrified her. I showed her the beast before I showed her the man. It was a mistake." "She's resilient," Jax offered. "She threatened to stab me with a chisel." "She called me a dog," Roman said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "She told me to sit. In the middle of a bloodbath, she scolded me." He stood up, his body aching with the strain of holding the wolf back. He walked to the window, looking out at the gray forest. "I will not pursue her," Roman said, the decision tasting like ash in his tongue. "I forced her into this world. I kidnapped her, essentially. I locked her in a car. I cannot force her to accept this. If she wants to leave, she leaves. I will not be the monster she fears." "So we just wait?" Jax asked. "We wait," Roman said. "We protect her from a distance. Make sure the shop is safe. Make sure the van keeps running. But I stay away." "And the West Wing?" "Let it rot," Roman growled. "I don't care about the wood. I only cared about the woman who was fixing it." The silence stretched, heavy and mournful. Roman closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to catch a phantom scent of orange polish and rain. But the air was empty. Chapter 19. The Contract. "You're going back." Roxy looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror of the orange. She looked pale, tired, and determined. She was wearing her battle flannel, a red and black plaid shirt that she usually reserved for arguing with zoning inspectors. "You are not going back for him," she told herself firmly. "You are going back because you signed a contract. You are a professional. You don't ghost clients, even if they are furry. You finish the job, you take the money, and you leave." It was a flimsy lie, but it was strong enough to get her to turn the key. The orange roared to life. Actually roared, thanks to whatever illegal engine tuning Jax had probably done. Roxy drove out of the city, her knuckles white on the wheel. When she arrived at the Castellan estate gates, the security camera swiveled toward her. She expected to be denied entry. She expected Roman to come storming out. Instead, the massive iron gates simply clicked and swung open. "Okay," she breathed. "Here we go." She parked in front of the fortress. It looked even more imposing in the daylight. She grabbed her tool bag and Sally's carrier because the cat had screamed until she was included. "Behave," she warned the cat. "We are strictly business today." She walked up to the front door. It was unlocked. Roxy stepped inside. The hallway had been cleaned. The broken table was gone. The blood had been scrubbed away so thoroughly it looked brand new. It was eerie, as if the violence of that night had never happened. "Hello?" she called out. Silence. "I'm here to work," she shouted deeper into the house. "I'm going to the library. Don't bother me." No one answered. She felt a pang of disappointment that she immediately crushed. This was what she wanted. Space, safety. She marched down the corridor to the west wing. The library was exactly as she had left it, tools scattered, floodlights off. She set Sally down, who immediately trotted off to sniff the spot where Roman had stood. "Focus, Roxy," she muttered. She picked up her scraper. "Strip the wood, treat the rot, get paid, go home." She worked for 3 hours in silence. It was grueling physical labor, and it helped quiet the noise in her head. But as she moved a stack of water-damaged books to get to the baseboards, she noticed something. The books weren't just random novels. They were journals, hand-bound leather ledgers, covered in dust and black mold. Curiosity, her fatal flaw, took over. She wiped the grime off the spine of the top book. It was dated 1894. She opened it. The handwriting was elegant, frantic script. "The winter is harsh. The pack is hungry. We have lost 3 to the hunters. I do not know if we will survive the frost." Roxy frowned. This wasn't just a book. This was history. She picked up another. Treaties of the Pacific, 1920. Another. Lineage of the Alpha Kings. She looked around the room. There were hundreds of them, rotting, eaten by silverfish, falling apart in the damp air. "He said he wanted to reopen this wing," Roxy whispered, anger bubbling up in her chest. "But he lets this sit here? This is their life. This is their memory." The restoration expert in her was offended. The human in her was heartbroken. "Unacceptable," she declared. She slammed the book shut. "If I'm fixing the wood, I'm saving the paper too. Someone has to be the adult in this house." Chapter 20. The Matriarch. "You are holding that wrong." Roxy jumped about a foot in the air, nearly dropping a crumbling map of Seattle from 1902. She spun around. Standing in the doorway of the library was a woman who looked like she was made of dried apples and iron wire. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with hair white as bone, pulled back into a severe bun. She was wearing a floral apron over a dress that looked like it belonged in a different century. What?" Roxy stammered. "The map," the old woman snapped, walking into the room with a cane that thumped rhythmically on the floor. "It is vellum. You do not hold it by the corners. The oils in your fingers will degrade the ink." She marched up to Roxy, snatched the map, and inspected it with critical dark eyes. "Who are you?" Roxy asked. "Are you another—" She trailed off, not wanting to say wolf. The old woman cackled. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Another monster?" "Yes, child. I am Elena. I am the matriarch. I wiped Roman's bottom when he was a pup, and I will likely bury him if he continues to be an idiot." She looked at Roxy, her gaze sharp and assessing. "So, you are the human who ran away." Roxy stiffened. "I had a valid reason. There was a naked wolf in the hallway." "Pah!" Olena waved a hand dismissively. "You saw a penis and some fur. It is not the end of the world. What matters is that you came back." She looked around the library, seeing the stacks of books Roxy had begun to organize on drop cloths. She saw the humidifier Roxy had set up. She saw the care Roxy was taking. The old woman's expression softened. "You are cleaning the archives." "Someone has to," Roxy said defensively. "It's a disgrace. Look at this. This is a treaty from 1912 signed by, well, I assume important people." "It's growing mushrooms, Olena. Mushrooms!" Olena ran a hand over a stack of journals. Her eyes, usually hard as flint, grew misty. "Roman's father, he stopped coming in here after the war. He said the past was heavy. Roman thinks he does not deserve the history." "That's stupid," Roxy said bluntly. History isn't a reward, it's just what happened. You can't let it rot just because you have daddy issues. Olenna stared at her for a moment, stunned. Then, she threw her head back and laughed, a genuine, loud sound. I like you, Olenna declared. You have a spine. Good. The pack needs a spine. We have too much muscle and not enough brain. She poked Roxy with her cane. Come, I have tea, and I will tell you which books you should actually save, and which ones are just Jax's terrible poetry from the 90s. I am not here to join the club, Roxy warned, though she didn't move away. I am here to work. Yes, yes. Olenna took her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Work. Tea. Then we yell at Roman. It is a good schedule. Roxy looked at the door. She looked at the old woman. She felt, for the first time since the attack, like she wasn't drowning. Fine, Roxy said, but if the tea is weird herbal wolf magic, I'm out. It is Earl Grey, you suspicious girl, Olenna muttered, dragging her toward the kitchen. And Sally is already there. She is eating the roast chicken I made for dinner. Of course she is, Roxy sighed, and let herself be led deeper into the wolf's den. Chapter 21. The Intervention. The kitchen of the Castellan estate was less of a cooking space and more of a culinary cathedral. It had 3 ovens, a walk-in fridge, and enough copper cookware to pay off Roxy's student loans. Currently, it also contained a very smug cat devouring a roast chicken on a marble island and a terrifying old woman pouring tea. Drink, Olenna ordered, shoving a delicate porcelain cup toward Roxy. You look like you have been eating sawdust. I work with sawdust, Roxy defended, taking the cup. It was Earl Grey, hot and strong. And I don't look that bad. You have circles under your eyes dark enough to store grain in, Olenna countered. She slammed a plate of scones onto the table. Eat. Then we go see the idiot. Roman? Roxy hesitated mid-scone. Actually, I think I should get back to the library. The fungal treatment needs to sit for... Sit. Olenna pointed her cane at a stool. Roxy sat immediately. You ran away. Now you are back. You are not sneaking around my house like a ghost. We deal with problems head-on in this family, usually with claws, but today with words. Roxy sighed. There was no arguing with a woman who looked like she could crochet a shroud in 5 minutes. She ate the scone. It was delicious. 10 minutes later, Olenna marched Roxy down the main corridor toward the double doors at the end of the hall. The matriarch didn't knock. She simply threw the doors open with a violence that belied her age. Guest, Olenna announced. Roman was standing behind a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single redwood tree. He was on the phone, his back to the door, staring out at the rain. He was wearing a black sweater that fit entirely too well, emphasizing the width of his shoulders. I don't care what the Southern Pack says, Roman growled into the phone. If they cross the river line again, I will remove their... He turned around. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the desk with a loud clatter. His amber eyes widened. He looked from his grandmother to Roxy, and for a second, the terrifying Alpha King looked like a deer caught in headlights. Grandmother, he said, his voice rough. What is this? I found a stray in the library, Olenna said, poking Roxy in the back with her cane. She was holding a map wrong. Fix it. With that, the old woman turned and marched out, slamming the doors shut behind her, leaving them in a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Roman stared at her. He looked tired. The bandage was gone from his neck, leaving a faint pink scar, but his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. You came back, he said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of disbelief. I have a contract, Roxy said, crossing her arms to hide the fact that her hands were shaking. And I brought my cat, who, unfortunately, is currently eating your dinner. Roman didn't smile. He walked around the desk, moving slowly, as if he was afraid sudden movements would startle her. He stopped 5 feet away, the safe distance. I thought you were gone, he said. After... the hallway. Yeah, well, Roxy looked at her boots. The hallway was a lot. You were naked. There was a dead guy. It wasn't my favorite Tuesday. I scared you. Yes, Roxy looked up, meeting his gaze. You did. But then I went home and I realized something. You saved my life. You turned into a nightmare to keep me safe. And I yelled at you to sit. Roman flinched slightly. It was emasculating. I'm sorry, Roxy said, stepping closer. For the yelling, not for the running away. That was a valid survival instinct. It was, Roman agreed. I should have explained. I should have told you what I was before I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me, Roxy corrected. I jumped in your car, remember? A ghost of a smile finally touched his lips. I remember. I'm finishing the job, Roman, Roxy said firmly. The library, the archives, I'm fixing it all. But you have to promise me one thing. Anything, he vowed. Next time you decide to turn into a giant dog, she deadpanned, give me a 5-minute warning so I can hide the breakables. Chapter 22. The Archivist. Over the next week, Miller's mending was essentially closed, and the west wing of the Castellan estate became Roxy's kingdom. She wasn't just restoring wood anymore, she was resurrecting a legacy. She had set up long tables in the center of the library, covered in white sheets. On them lay the history of the North American Lycans, journals, maps, treaties, and letters, drying out under carefully calibrated humidifiers. Careful! Roxy snapped, pointing a bone folder at a young man who was carrying a stack of ledgers. That represents the 1920 peace accord. If you drop it, you are personally responsible for the next war. The young man, a wolf named Caleb who usually served as a perimeter guard, looked terrified. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. It turned out the pack was full of young wolves who had no idea their history existed. Roman had kept the wing closed for so long that a generation had grown up thinking their past was just stories. Now they were fascinated. Roxy would find them lingering in the doorways, massive, gym rat-looking guys, staring at the old photos of wolves from the 1800s. Is that great-grandfather Silas? One of them whispered, pointing at a sepia photo of a grim-faced man standing next to a timber wolf. Yes, Roxy said, looking up from her magnifying glass. And apparently he had terrible posture. Don't slouch or you'll end up like Silas. The wolves straightened up immediately. Roman watched it all from the shadows of the hallway. He saw how she commanded the room. She wasn't an alpha, she wasn't a Luna, she wasn't even a wolf. But she had an authority that was undeniable. She demanded respect, not because she could break their bones, but because she was saving their souls. She's good for them, Jack said, appearing beside Roman. He was knitting a hat now. The elders are talking. Let them talk, Roman said, his eyes fixed on Roxy as she lectured Caleb on the acidity of human fingertips. They're saying she has the spirit of the hearth, Jack said. It's an old term. Means someone who builds the home, not just the house. Roman felt a tightness in his chest. Hearth. Yes, that was what she was. She was the warmth in a cold castle. Has she asked about me? Roman asked quietly. No, Jax replied, but she leaves the door open, every day. Inside the library, Roxy felt the weight of his gaze. She knew he was there. She could smell the sandalwood and rain that clung to him even from a distance. She didn't look up. She wasn't ready yet. They were dancing around each other, a polite, professional orbit. He brought her coffee in the mornings, leaving it on the table without a word. She left reports on his desk in the evenings, but the tension was building. It was in the air, thick and electric. Okay, break time, Roxy announced to her crew of terrified werewolves. Go eat something meat-heavy. I need silence to fix this binding. As the wolves filed out, Olenna hobbled in. She looked at the progress, the gleaming wood, the organized shelves, the preserved history. You have done well, child, Olenna said, running a hand over a restored chair. It's just glue and polish, Roxy muttered, embarrassed. No, Olenna looked at her. It is care. Roman needs care. He thinks he is a weapon. You are showing him he can be a man. I'm just an employee, Roxy deflected. Olenna cackled. And I am a ballerina. Finish your work, Roxy. The storm is coming tonight. You should stay in the guest room. I have a van, Roxy protested. The storm, Olenna repeated, her tone brokering no argument. Stay. Chapter 23. The Confession. Olenna was right about the storm. By 10 p.m., the sky had opened up, unleashing a deluge that battered the stone walls of the estate. Thunder shook the floorboards. Roxy couldn't sleep. The guest room was luxurious, silken sheets, a fireplace, but it felt too big. She wandered back to the library. It was her sanctuary now. She didn't turn on the main lights. She just lit the lamp on her work table. The shadows of the room were long and deep. You should be sleeping. Roxy didn't jump. She felt him before she heard him. Roman stepped out of the darkness. He was wearing loose gray sweatpants and a t-shirt that clung to his chest. He looked softer in the dim light, less like a king and more like a man who couldn't sleep either. I'm an insomniac, Roxy said, picking up a piece of sandpaper just to have something to hold. Quiet helps me think. What are you thinking about? Roman asked. He walked closer, stopping on the other side of the long work table. About this house, Roxy said. It's so big, Roman, and it was so empty. Why did you let it get like this? Roman ran a hand along the edge of the table. Because I didn't think I'd be here long. Roxy frowned. What do you mean? The alphas of my line. Roman hesitated, looking at the shelves of journals she had saved. We are violent creatures, Roxy. We live hard and we die young. Usually in battle, usually protecting the pack. I assumed I would be the same. Why fix a roof if you won't be around to sit under it? That's morbid, Roxy said quietly. It's practical. It's stupid, she countered. She put the sandpaper down and walked around the table. She stopped in front of him. You're 30-something? You have hundreds of years left according to these books. You were planning on just existing? Until someone killed you? Until you, Roman whispered. The air in the room changed. It became heavy, charged with the scent of ozone and desire. Roman, Roxy warned, her heart hammering. I didn't care about the future, Roman confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I didn't care about the history. I was just holding the line, but then a woman jumped into my car and complained about my punctuality. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. This time, he didn't pull back. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin. His hand was large, warm, and calloused. You woke me up, Roxy, and that terrified me, because if I wake up, if I want things, then I have something to lose. I'm not something you lose, Roxy whispered, leaning into his touch despite herself. I'm not a set of keys, Roman. I'm right here. I know, he murmured, stepping closer, his body heat radiating into her. But the wolf, he is possessive. He wants to lock you away. He wants to keep you where nothing can touch you. I am fighting him every second not to carry you to my room and barricade the door. Roxy looked up at him. She saw the struggle in his eyes, the gold bleeding into the brown. She saw the fear, and she saw the love. Well, Roxy said, her voice shaking but clear, I locked my bedroom door tonight, but I didn't lock this one. Roman went still. Roxy, be sure. I don't do secrets, she said, and I don't do fear. If we're doing this, we're doing it. No more hiding in the hallway. Chapter 24. The Surrender. The space between them vanished. Roman didn't grab her. He waited, letting her close the final inch. When she did, when she pressed her chest against his, a low, rumbling growl vibrated in his throat that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like coming home. He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision. It was 300 years of waiting crashing into one moment of absolute surrender. His mouth was hot, demanding, tasting of mint and restraint that was rapidly snapping. Roxy gasped, opening to him, and he took it as an invitation to devour her. His hands slid down her back, gripping her hips, lifting her effortlessly onto the sturdy oak table she had spent a week refinishing. "Roman," she breathed against his lips. "Mine," he growled, burying his face in her neck, inhaling her scent like it was oxygen. "You are mine, Roxanne, in every way that matters." "Talk is cheap, wolf boy," she challenged breathlessly, wrapping her legs around his waist. "Show me." He did. He stripped the flannel shirt from her shoulders with a reverence that bordered on worship. His hands were everywhere, rough palms on soft skin, mapping her, claiming her. He treated her like the finest thing in the archives, precious and rare, but he loved her with the ferocity of the beast. There was no room for shy awkwardness. The air was thick with heat and the sound of ragged breathing. "You have no idea," Roman murmured against her skin, his teeth grazing her collarbone, sending shivers straight to her toes. "How long I have wanted to hear you say my name like that." "Then stop talking," Roxy commanded, pulling his face back to hers. When they finally came together, it was an intoxicating blur of friction and feeling. It was the feeling of being anchored. For the first time in her life, Roxy didn't feel like she was fighting the world alone. She felt held. She felt safe in the eye of the storm. He moved with a powerful, rhythmic grace, watching her face with intense, glowing amber eyes, cataloging every gasp, every arch of her back. He was domineering, yes, pinning her hands to the table, taking control, but he was also utterly devoted. "Say it," he demanded, his voice a rough rasp in her ear as the tension coiled tight in her belly. "Yours!" she cried out. "I'm yours!" The mating bond, something she had read about in the journals but dismissed as fairy tales, snapped into place like a physical lock. It wasn't painful. It was a rush of golden warmth, a sense of rightness that settled deep in her bones. Roman roared her name, burying his face in her hair as they both unraveled, the storm outside forgotten, the only world existing right here, on a table covered in treaties of peace. Chapter 25. The Morning After. Sunlight streamed through the heavy velvet curtains, blindingly bright. Roxy groaned, trying to roll over, but found she was trapped. A heavy arm was draped across her waist, pinning her to the mattress. She blinked her eyes open. She wasn't in the guest room. She was in the master suite. The bed was enormous, roughly the size of a small island, and the sheets were silk. She turned her head. Roman was asleep beside her. In repose, the king looked younger. The harsh lines of stress around his eyes were smoothed out. He was lying on his stomach, one arm thrown over her, his face buried in the pillow. His back was a vast map of muscle and faint scars, rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Roxy felt a blush creep up her neck as memories of the library, and then the stairs, and then the shower, and then the bed, came flooding back. "Oh God," she whispered. "I slept with the client." Something heavy landed on the bed near her feet. Roxy looked down. Sally was sitting there, looking smug. The cat walked up the length of the bed, stepping directly onto Roman's back. Roman grunted, shifting slightly, but didn't wake up. Sally, sensing a prime napping spot, circled 3 times and flopped down right between Roman's shoulder blades. Roxy clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a giggle. The most feared predator in North America was currently being used as a mattress by a 20-pound ginger tabby. Roman's eyes cracked open. They were gold, lazy, and warm. "There is a weight on me," he rumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "It's a parasite," Roxy whispered. "Don't move. She bites." Roman turned his head, seeing the cat. He chuckled, the sound vibrating through the mattress. He reached back and scratched Sally's ears. Sally purred so loudly the headboard rattled. "Good morning," Roman said, turning his gaze to Roxy. The heat in his eyes made her toes curl. "Morning," Roxy said, pulling the sheet up to her chin. "So, are we going to talk about the fact that I'm technically trespassing in the king's chambers?" You aren't trespassing. Roman reached out, pulling her closer until she was flush against his side. You live here now. Whoa, slow down. Roxy poked him in the chest. I have a lease. I have a business. I have a van. We will move the van, Roman said dismissively, kissing her forehead. And the business. The old carriage house is empty. It has reinforced floors. You can put your saws there. You want me to move my woodshop into your ancestral castle? I want you where I can reach you, Roman said, his tone turning serious. He traced the line of her jaw. The bond, Roxy. Do you feel it? She did. It was a hum in the back of her mind, a constant awareness of his presence. It felt like safety. I feel it, she admitted, but I'm still keeping my apartment. A girl needs a backup plan. Roman smirked. For now. The door to the bedroom burst open. Jack stood there, holding a tablet and wearing a neon pink beanie that matched his scarf. He froze, seeing Roxy, Roman, and the cat in the bed. Oh, Jack said, turning bright red. The door was unlocked. Get out, Jax, Roman growled, pulling the sheet over Roxy to shield her. Right, yes, sorry. Jax backed away but stopped. Actually, I can't leave. We have a problem. Roman sat up, the sheet falling to his waist. The playful lover vanished, replaced instantly by the king. What is it? The Southern Pack, Jack said, his face grim. They didn't just cross the river. They're here, at the gates, and Alpha Sterling is demanding to see the human witch who killed his rogue. Roxy sat up, clutching the sheet. Witch? I hit him with a candelabra! Roman's eyes went cold. He swung his legs out of bed, standing up in all his naked glory without an ounce of shame. Tell Sterling, Roman said, his voice dropping to a terrifying subsonic growl, that if he wants to see my queen, he can come in, but he won't be walking out. Here are chapters 26 through 28, the end of I Mistook the Lycan King for My Uber Driver. Chapter 26, The Witch of Castellan. Roman dressed with the terrifying efficiency of a soldier going to war. He pulled on black jeans and a tactical shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the fact that he was built like a siege weapon. Stay here, he ordered, checking a Glock he pulled from the nightstand. Absolutely not, Roxy countered, hopping out of bed and grabbing her flannel shirt from the floor. He called me a witch. That's slander. I'm a restoration expert. If anything, I'm a wizard of wood varnish. Roxy, Alpha Sterling is violent. He is old guard. He thinks humans are food or pets. Roman stopped at the door, his hand on the knob. His eyes were burning gold. I will not let him near you. And I will not let you start a war because some guy is insecure about a lamp. Roxy grabbed her boots. I'm coming, and I'm grabbing that candelabra from the hallway on my way out. 10 minutes later, the front gates of the Castellan estate were a tableau of impending violence. On one side stood the Castellan security team, led by Jax, who had thankfully ditched the pink beanie for an assault rifle. On the other side stood Alpha Sterling, a man who looked like a slab of beef jerky that had been left in the sun too long, and a dozen of his snarling enforcers. Bring out the witch! Sterling roared, spitting on the cobblestones. She killed my best tracker with dark magic. She crushed his bones with a golden staff. Roman stepped out of the front door, his presence hitting the courtyard like a physical blow. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Get off my land, Sterling, Roman rumbled, before I bury you in it. Sterling sneered. You harbor a sorceress, Castellan, a human who wields unnatural power. We demand justice. You want justice? The voice didn't belong to Roman. Roxy stepped out from behind Roman's massive frame. She was wearing her flannel, her combat boots, and she was holding the heavy brass candelabra resting casually on her shoulder like a baseball bat. I didn't use magic, Roxy announced, her voice ringing clear in the silence. I used brass. It's an alloy of copper and zinc. Very heavy. Very effective against intruders who try to bite people in hallways. Sterling took a step back, eyeing the candelabra with genuine fear. "The golden staff," he whispered to his beta. "She summons it." Roxy blinked. "It's a candle holder! Are you serious? Is the bar for witchcraft really this low?" "She admits it!" Sterling shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "She mocks the ancient ways! Roman, surrender her or we attack!" Roman let out a low, menacing laugh. He moved to stand in front of Roxy, blocking her from view, his body radiating lethal intent. "You are mistaken," Roman said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "She is not a witch." He turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Roxy. The bond between them flared, hot, possessive, and undeniable. "She is my mate," Roman declared, "and she is your queen." The silence that followed was deafening. The enforcers dropped their weapons. Sterling's jaw unhinged. Even Jax looked surprised. "Mate?" Sterling choked out. "A human?" "A human who put your best tracker in the ICU with home decor," Roman corrected darkly, ignoring the fact that he was the one who broke the bones, not her lamp. "Now, run, before she decides to redecorate your face." Roxy stepped around Roman again, twirling the candelabra effortlessly. She gave Sterling a flat, bored look. "I charge double for weekends. Shoo!" Terrified by the prospect of facing the Witch Queen and the Lycan King simultaneously, Sterling signaled a retreat. The Southern pack scrambled into their vehicles and peeled out of the driveway, kicking up gravel in their haste to escape the woman with the lamp. Chapter 27. The Coronation. The courtyard was quiet, save for the sound of retreating engines. Roman didn't relax. He turned slowly to face his own pack, the guards, the staff, the young wolves who had gathered on the steps to watch the confrontation. They were all staring at Roxy. She stood there, holding a brass antique, wearing a flannel shirt 3 sizes too big, with messy hair and a chin held high. Roman walked up to her. He didn't care about the audience. He didn't care about protocol. He took the candelabra from her hand and handed it to Jax. Then, he dropped to one knee. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The Lycan King did not kneel. Not for alphas. Not for councils. Not for anyone. "Roman," Roxy whispered, her face flushing pink. "Stand up. You're making it weird." "You fought for this house," Roman said, his voice rough with emotion, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You saved its history. You defended its halls. You claimed its king." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, which were still white from gripping the weapon. "I offered you a job," he said, looking up at her with eyes that held the warmth of a hearth fire. "Now I am offering you a crown. It comes with a lot of headaches, a terrifying matriarch in the kitchen, and a cat who likes me more than you. But it also comes with me." Roxy looked down at him. She looked at the pack, who were watching her, not with suspicion, but with awe. She looked at Jax, who gave her a thumbs up. She looked at Olenna, who was watching from the window, nodding approval. She realized she wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't running. She had finally found a place that wasn't just a project to fix, but a home to live in. "Get up, you dramatic wolf," Roxy said, a smile breaking across her face. "I'm keeping my apartment, and I'm keeping my van." Roman stood, towering over her, a grin spreading across his face. "Anything else?" "Yeah." Roxy grabbed his lapels and pulled him down. "I'm raising my rates." She kissed him. It wasn't a polite kiss. It was a seal, a promise, a claim. When they broke apart, the pack didn't cheer. They howled. A chorus of voices rising to the sky, acknowledging the new order. Roman wrapped his arm around her waist, pulled her flush against his side. "Long live the queen," he whispered into her hair. "Long live the paycheck," Roxy whispered back, though she was squeezing his hand just as tight. Chapter 28. Epilogue. 6 months later. The conference room of the Castellan estate was filled with the most dangerous creatures on the planet. The International Council of Alphas sat around the mahogany table. There was Alpha Volkov from Russia, who had scars older than the furniture. Alpha Dubois from France, who looked like a supermodel and killed like a viper. And Alpha Hideo from Japan, who sat in perfect silence. Roman sat at the head of the table. The tension was palpable. They were discussing territory lines in the Arctic. War was on the horizon. "The line must be drawn at the ridge." Volkov slammed his fist on the table. "I will not accept less." "The ridge is neutral ground," Dubois hissed. Roman rubbed his temples. He was about to issue a command that would silence them all when the double doors burst open. The room froze. Every alpha turned, ready to attack the intruder. Roxy marched in. She was wearing overalls covered in sawdust and a messy bun held together by a pencil. In her arms, she held Sally. Sally was wearing a diamond-encrusted collar that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. But Sally looked miserable. Sally looked round. "Roman Castellan!" Roxy shouted, ignoring the terrifying council of warlords. The alphas stared in shock. No one yelled at the king. Roman's face paled. "Roxy, is everything okay?" "Is everything okay?" Roxy stormed up to the head of the table. She dumped the cat onto the treaty documents. "Look at her! Look at this animal!" Volkov leaned away from the cat. "Is this a weapon?" "It's a basketball with fur." Roxy pointed a finger at Roman. "You fed her the Wagyu beef again. The vet said she has cholesterol issues, Roman. She is wheezing when she purrs." Roman sighed, hanging his head. "She looked sad, Roxy. She was meowing at the fridge." "She is a con artist," Roxy exclaimed. "She is playing you. You are the strongest predator in North America, and you are being manipulated by a ginger tabby." "She has very persuasive eyes," Roman muttered defensively. The room was silent. The terrifying alphas of the council looked from the angry woman in overalls to the henpecked king, and then to the fat cat who was currently licking a paw on the Arctic treaty. Dubois cleared his throat. "Is this the Witch Queen?" "Yes," Roman said, a look of pure adoration crossing his face as he looked at his wife. "Gentlemen, we will adjourn for 10 minutes. I need to apologize to my wife and put my cat on the treadmill." He stood up, wrapping an arm around Roxy's waist. Roxy was still ranting about caloric intake, but she leaned into him, her hand resting subconsciously on her stomach. Roman paused. He froze. He sniffed the air. Beneath the scent of sawdust, orange polish, and angry cat, there was something new. Something faint, milky, and undeniably sweet. A second heartbeat, fluttering soft and fast like a hummingbird wing. The blood drained from Roman's face, then rushed back in a flush of overwhelming emotion. His hand moved from her waist to cover hers on her stomach. "Roxy," he breathed, his voice trembling. "What?" Roxy stopped mid-rant. "Are you listening? No more beef, kibble only." "Roxy." Roman dropped to his knees right there in the conference room, ignoring the council. He pressed his face against her belly, inhaling deeply. "Did you just eat a weird burrito, or are we having a crisis of a different kind?" Roxy blinked. She looked down at him. She looked at the alphas watching with wide eyes. She looked at Sally, who purred. Then she smiled, a slow, terrified, wonderful smile. "Well," Roxy whispered, running her fingers through his dark hair, "I hope you know how to build a crib, Alpha, because I'm charging you triple for the labor." The end.